Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Women Taking the Lead virtual lunch. I hope everyone is doing well today. You all look great, and I hope you're holding up well too. Well, we have assembled an impressive powerhouse panel to discuss a topic that's important to all of us right now, communicating through a pandemic. We were just talking in the green room just a few minutes ago, and these industries that panel here is just suffering. We are in unprecedented times full of uncertainty and disruption. As communications experts in our respective industries, we are communicating more now than ever before, and often we're having to relay very difficult messages. So times are tough, and that requires empathy and clarity and calm, and some challenging decisions from a strategic perspective as well. It's a heavy lift, so we wanted to bring in some top communications experts today who are in the midst of navigating the pandemic to see what we can learn from them and how they are crafting messages for their internal teams, their customers, their clients, and their communities. Let me just go ahead and introduce the panel today. Our panel today is, again, very impressive. It consists of 3 women working at the very top of industries that are deeply impacted by this pandemic. Rosanna Maietta is Executive Vice President of Communications at the American Hotel and Lodging Association and President of the AHLA Foundation. Rebecca Spicer is Senior Vice President of Communications at Airlines for America. And Michelle Russo is our Chief Communications Officer for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which represents businesses across all industries and sectors across the world. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and start the panel. Is everyone ready? We're going to go ahead and start with a question for all of you right now. And I'll start with Rebecca. Tell us, can you tell us a little bit how your industry is faring? We know there's a lot going on with the airlines in the midst of this pandemic, and what you're doing, what the airlines are doing, what your trade association is doing to take action and help your members right now.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks to you and the Chamber for organizing this virtual event. I think it's a great opportunity to bring us together and to collaborate and communicate and share some ideas. You're right, it has been just incredibly unusual times. Just a few months ago, at the end of 2019, I was doing a satellite media tour talking about historically high record travel numbers. On any given day in the United States, we were seeing 2.5 million people go to the airport and board airplanes. And we called it the golden age, and it really was. We saw historically low airfares. We saw more flights than ever before, going to more destinations than ever before. So it was an exciting time for the industry. And truthfully, coming into 2020, entering January and February, we said, okay, we had such a great time in November talking about holiday travel. Let's do it again going into the spring break season and the summer season. So we were preparing another round of media tours talking about record travel. And to put that in context, I think it was March 4th or 5th, that my CEO, Nick Callio, was over at the Chamber with some of your CEOs as well, talking about America is still open for business. Later that morning, the airline CEOs went over to the White House, where the president said, in the pool spray in the Roosevelt Room after the meeting, the president said, where these folks are flying, it is safe to go. Fast forward just a couple weeks later, and truly the bottom fell out for our industry. By April 14th, we were down to fewer than 90,000 people a day going to the airport and boarding airplanes. Reminder, I had said earlier, it was 2.5 million people a day. We were looking at 90+%. I think some days it was 96 and 97% decline of business. Clearly, that's just not sustainable. And as you all know, that if the airlines aren't getting people to other places, whether it's for business or vacation or to see family or anything, it means that they're not staying in hotels, they're not going to restaurants, they're not going to theme parks, there's a lot they're not doing, and they're not spending money. So this was important. So it was important for us to also, as an association, lean in and engage our members and to find consensus to lead them to, as an industry. And it's really actually been very inspirational to see how our carriers, who are fierce competitors, have come together, taking their brand hats off to find that consensus and to understand that we need a strong industry in order to survive. In order for those brands to make it, we need the industry to survive right now. So let me real quickly, before we get to the other questions, you asked what have we been doing for our members. Quickly, we've been obviously leaning into the policy side, the regulatory side, finding opportunities and having conversations. We were clearly part of the CARES Act, as I know everybody around here has had those conversations too. But for our member communications, we started producing a daily digest so that they didn't have to worry about what news clips were appearing on an industry level. We've been really active in generating data. For example, something that's been really useful recently is that we now know over 3,000 airplanes are grounded. They're stored in the desert or somewhere else. That's over half of the American fleet, half of the US fleet. And we launched instantly a microsite to serve as a resource for our members that have travel policies, the good deeds that they're doing in this pandemic and so forth. So lots of opportunity out there.
Thank you, Rebecca. Very heartening to see that an industry is kind of leaning in and working together, and it's such a scary time. Thank you for all that you're doing. And Rosanna, you're talking about you need airlines to be able to go to hotels. It kind of all works together. I'm just curious your perspective on how things are going. We know things aren't great, but what you're doing for the industry, your industry.
Thank you, AHLA, and I'm so excited to join my these amazing ladies and leaders in their own industries as well. I mean, our situation is very similar to what Rebecca outlined. The fate of hotels and is so closely linked to that of airlines, and very similar story, unfortunately, with the unemployment numbers that came out. We've seen 7.7 million jobs in hospitality and leisure being lost. We're the leading industry that has been impacted. We were one of the first to be impacted, and we expect to be one of the last to recover, because the sad truth is that even though Congress has worked really hard to get money into the hands of small business owners, no one is yet traveling. Those restrictions are being lifted slowly across the country, so not a lot of people are in hotels, and that means it's really hard for a small business hotel owner to hire his employees back when there are no guests. And so right now, a lot of the focus is simply on keeping the lights on, and how do we keep from seeing hundreds and thousands of small business hotels going under and never opening their doors. So our work is really focused on that human toll. It's been two goals: keep protecting our employees, trying to get them some financial support during this time, and then keeping our hotels open. And so advocating on that, very daily. Similar to what Rebecca outlined, the messaging and the communication has changed dramatically. We've implemented, what I like to call, sort of harkening back to my own newsroom days, a newsroom approach to sharing information with our members. It is timely, it is relevant, it is around the clock. It has literally been a 24/7 environment for us since the end of February, and that comes with some challenges, which I know we'll talk about. How do you get your staff to stay motivated and productive at these really high levels and high stakes levels? I mean, we're talking about human lives and the lives of our employees, people who have been dedicating their careers to the industry. I mean, we in the heydays, we used to boast that this was an industry where you could come in as a dishwasher or a bellman and rise up to the level of CEO. And so many of our CEOs now who lead global companies started in entry-level positions. And so they have a particular perspective around wanting to do more for their employees now, and how do you keep that line of communication going. And so we've also seen some amazing stories of support. I mean, we are in the people business, and we're you know, on the main street of every congressional district around the country. And so when you think about that, hotels are so central to that fabric of a community. And so we've seen and pushed out and created initiatives where we could link first responders with hotels that were open, helping us keep the lights on, but also doing something to support the community. And so we've really looked at this from a breaking news perspective, but also community perspective.
Thank you, Rosanna. And thank you. Just keeping the lights on and, you know, being the fabric of the community is so important right now. And, you know, that just leads me right to Michelle Russo, who is working so hard 24/7 with small businesses and helping to get money into hands of small businesses. So Michelle, do you want to give us a little bit of insight into what the Chamber's doing and what you're doing to message during this time?
Sure. Thanks so much. Really appreciate hearing those other perspectives as well. And heart goes out to everyone that works in those industries. So as most people on this call would know, the Chamber represents businesses of all sizes across every sector. And so that really has given us a very holistic view at the impact of this virus on our economy and our communities, per some of the points made earlier. So what the Chamber has done during this time is what other American businesses and organizations have done, which is lean into its strengths and do what it can, utilize its unique capabilities to address the pandemic. And so for the Chamber, the key competencies are education, advocacy, and convening. And we've been doing that in different ways throughout. At the outset, we organized our work, although albeit didn't realize how long the phases would be. We organized our work into 3 phases. First is that emergency, this first hit, and what should people be doing now. And so we focused our work on educating employers and providing them with some resources on how to protect their employees. The second phase is mitigation, and we're still in the mitigation phase. And then the third phase is recovery. So in the mitigation phase, we focused on our core competencies, obviously, of the advocacy, of advocating for that relief that was much needed and how to get that into hands, and education. So we're talking about small businesses who don't know how to access a federal loan and go through that process. And so, as described by some of the other panelists, just have been over communicating, creating numerous weekly virtual events. We're about to hit the 100,000 mark of how many people we've convened over the first 9 weeks. And it's really been incredible and entirely humbling to just hear the need and how palpable that need is for information in an environment with imperfect information. And so we've really tried to be a resource to businesses of all sizes. And then the third is the path to recovery, which we all need to be on, and every week that status changes. And so what we did in plotting out the path to recovery is used, again, the diverse membership that we're lucky to have at the Chamber, and start to establish member task forces on what issues would be most important to help businesses get back online, or actually offline and back to business. And quite frankly, we all know that returning to work and returning to business means returning to our lives and our places of worship and our leisure activities. And so really trying to find what are those unique things that may affect a certain type of working situation, like a high density business as these women work in, or office settings or industrial manufacturing, and what are those individual considerations, as well as what are those issues that cut across all types of businesses and sectors, and how can we then turn that knowledge into power in our advocacy for things that are going to help alleviate and somewhat mitigate, although you can't entirely do so right now, an imperfect environment with data that changes day to day, week to week about what the response should be. But we know that returning to work has to be done safely so that it's sustainable. We know that employers want to protect their employees and customers. That's the definition of having a sustainable business. And everybody wants to do the right thing, but it's extremely difficult to navigate in this environment. And today, one thing we launched, a new thing we've launched a number of guides and resources and weekly events. But today we launched a return to work kind of digital resource center, because we know people are navigating so much information. And so we really want to be a trusted source for guides on things from, here are other resources we can point you to, like guidelines on safety, as well as an employer questionnaire you might utilize for your employees, and resources such as that, so that we can just share the information we've been collecting and make it easier for people who need it to find it.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. And, you know, you've all pointed out that it's an extremely difficult time to communicate right now. It's just a different environment. It's stressful for everyone. There's chaos. There's a lot of uncertainty. And my next question for everyone, and we'll start with Rebecca, is how are you communicating differently? You all talked about it a little bit, but how are you talking with more empathy? You know, what is it that you're using, and you know, what are the do's and don'ts in this period of conversation now?
Thanks, Ashley. And it's a great question. And I think the way you framed it too around empathy is so apropos, because, you know, on one hand, there's kind of the functional changes that we've all made to how we communicate. Of course, I've always been a big advocate of in-person communications and in-office meetings and face-to-face work. And clearly we've had to work around that, because as we're dealing with whether it's PR challenges or policy challenges, we also are faced with our own communication and personal challenges in this pandemic. So it's been a multifaceted approach of how we've had to change our lives. So clearly, we all know there are no more meetings in conference rooms. And I think the first couple of weeks out, I'll speak for myself, it was, oh, well, we can do a conference call. And then we kind of leaned into, okay, well, maybe we'll start some of this video chat so we can at least remind ourselves what each other looks like. And, you know, maybe some of us will actually get dressed for the event too. But it was a reminder too of how to, especially for membership organizations like all of us on this panel today, how to lean into our members and to lean into what their needs are through a crisis and provide those resources and open up those lines of communications. And truthfully, it has meant a lot more phone calls. I am very glad that I have unlimited data. I'm sure most people on this call do. But it has meant a lot more listening and asking the right questions, because we all know that there was no playbook for this. There's no rule book. And we are writing the rules as we go. We're also writing history as we go. And it's evolving at a click. I would be shocked if anybody on this call has ever seen any news cycle like what we've been experiencing on all fronts. It's just been super fast. And there are lots of questions for every industry in our personal lives too. And yet there are no right or wrong answers. So I think it's all really just locking arms and listening and just trying to be smart and strategic and analyzing as we go. Ashley, I'll send it back to you now.
Sorry about that. My mic was muted there for a moment. But Michelle or Rosanna, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. This is Rosanna. I would just add that, yes to all of what Rebecca said, and I think in a normal environment, we always used to worry about how many email blasts we would send in our marketing communication to our members, and be very conscious about the sequence, and that's all gone out the window. And I think in particular right now, we are leaning towards providing more information as it happens, and they're really looking to us to weed through the noise for them, because there is so much coming at them, and I think that has become a really valuable place for us. I think the other interesting piece of that is, here you had, an office of, government affairs, membership, marketing, communications. We've all had to become experts on COVID, on symptoms, on PPP, on small business loans, on CMBS loans. So we've now all had to really ramp up very quickly in different areas. And I think that's where I've seen, it's been a pleasure to really see people in our own office taking on different tracks of this crisis and becoming the de facto expert in the office to really help us distill that information to members. So I think, it's been that twofold piece, making sure that what we're sharing is accurate information, the information they need the most, the information they need to act on, and also sharing it in a timely way. So if something is happening at 9 p.m. on a Saturday, we are all on call. We are all ready to activate and deploy information as quickly as possible. And I think they've seen the value in that. And it's really an important place to be when you're a membership company or organization, rather.
Thank you.
I'm going to agree with everything both of the ladies said, but also pick up on a word that you used in the question, Ashley, which is empathy. And just constant reminder of empathy in all types of communications is absolutely critical, whether that's one-to-one communications with your colleagues or more macro level communications with members and staff, quite frankly. We've put a lot of emphasis on communicating with our staff. We're doing it much more regularly. And one of the hardest things, as has been discussed in several contexts in this conversation, is we all don't have all the answers. We don't know how to answer every question. But I've always coached leadership teams at this job and in previous roles that just because you don't have the answers doesn't mean you don't take the questions. And so we just need to be present and transparent about what we know and what we don't know. And that's both with members of all sizes as well as our own employee base. And I've seen a lot of organizations do the same, especially with that emphasis on keeping what everyone's most important asset is their employees informed on what they know, and just empathetic for appreciating. As Rebecca said, we're all dealing with different types of personal challenges in this environment, and every case is different. And so you just have to lead with empathy on how people are receiving the messages we're sending.
Great, thank you so much. And just on the empathy issue, Rosanna, I just want to turn it over to you. I know that your industry, there's been a lot of tough decisions that are being made. And I wanted to see if you also had some advice to our listeners and our viewers about how they can, as leaders, communicate right now on tough decisions and, just communicate through the unknowns as a leader.
Sure, thank you. That has been, I think, one of the hardest challenges, and both Rebecca and Michelle touched upon that, right? Always lead with empathy. I think, the interesting part about the hotel industry and AHLA in particular is because we're dues-based and because our members are going through such a traumatic time, that's hit our association as well. We had to furlough a third of our staff, and so here you are, as an organization that you've never been more valuable to your members, and they know it and they see it every day, every hour, and yet we've had to make those tough decisions. And now you have the team that's left that, in some ways feels guilty for being, for staying on, but they're now, they were already working at 120% capacity. Now you're adding another layer of complexity because they have to take on the work that their colleagues have left behind. And how do you deal with that? And there's no real good way to do it. I will say, we struggled with that. And first of all, I think obviously the personal connections are the most important throughout this time, whether you have furloughs or not. As a leader, I'm making sure that I'm making the rounds with my team. Yes, we're all talking more and having, regular meetings, but I am trying to as often as I can either text someone or call them just to check in, not work related, but just to see how they're doing. Everyone's dealing with dogs or little kids or being alone even in this time. And so that's a hard juggle. And every day you can wake up, someday you'll wake up and you'll feel great, and others days you're depressed. And so you need to understand that being so highly productive and being in the thick of the crisis 24/7 takes its toll, because unlike some other organizations where maybe they're not in the throes of helping to save their industry, right? You're dealing with this all the time and you don't really have a break. And I think that we need to make sure that they're having some mental health time. I had a meeting last week with my team and I cut it to 30 minutes and I said, please go take a walk, put your devices down, just take some time for yourself. I think that is more and more important. The other part of this, of course, is transparency. You have to be transparent, whether with your teams or even your principal and how he's sharing information with his board and his officers. Regular communication, being open about what the challenges and struggles are. I think that is really important. Your team members want to know what you know. And even if the answer right now is, I don't know, it's important that they hear that. Because we're all working remotely in this very weird, surreal environment, right? There's still office chatter and the gossip and it's just happening in a different form. And so in some ways you want to make sure that you're providing as much clarity as you can, and based on what you know now. And I think people respect that, and they also understand that we're all living in this very strange time. But you have to be as transparent as you can, even though it's difficult and you may not have all the answers.
We are living in a difficult time. Thank you. And, I'm going to turn to Rebecca right now on, and, we've talked a lot about being in the thick of the crisis for your industry. And we are going to re-enter. We are going to re-enter the workforce. It is going to happen. We are going to move forward at some point. And Rebecca, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how do you think communications, marketing, and branding is changing now as we sort of move, we're in this crisis, but we are moving forward. How do you perceive it changing?
I think, again, another great question. And I mentioned a few minutes ago how inspiring it's been to watch these highly competitive companies in the airline industry come together for the industry good and to move forward with an industry perspective. And I think, everybody realizes again that whether it's a company or people, that truthfully, first of all, companies are people, and that's been on full display that I've seen. And one is that they all realize that we need a strong industry in order to have strong brands and strong marketing. Where we have found consensus most recently as an industry is working to, first of all, protect the jobs. We have 750,000 men and women who take great pride in this. And we were actually humbled when we saw that some 450,000 letters got sent to Capitol Hill throughout the CARES Act asking, please grant this money to save our jobs. It's just truly a tribute to this industry. And I know other industries have similar stories, but when it's your inbox that you're seeing this all come through, it's truly humbling. And it reminds you of the work that we're doing on a daily basis, especially here in Washington. It matters to individual lives. And since the CARES Act has been passed and implemented, we're seeing the industry unite on now some changes to implement to the industry, and some that are very forward facing, that are public facing, such as the industry has come together to say they are going to require facial coverings for both customer-facing employees as well as passengers on airplanes, truthfully throughout their travel experience. Just over the weekend, the carriers came out and said that they're supporting the TSA to start doing temperature screenings at airports. So all of these measures, though, are being advanced as an industry and not individual brands. But I think it's important because, again, people are looking holistically at this industry of treating it as a brand right now in order to get it back in business, to get people back on airplanes, to relaunch not just the airline industry, but of course the US economy and the global economy too, because as we've been discussing in the green room before this, everything is so intertwined, and we all need to be working arm in arm, hand in glove, all of that to get the economies going again.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Michelle, speaking of working arm in arm and the business community working together, I'm hearing a higher than usual fear factor around communication right now. People aren't sure what messages are resonating or what to feel right now. So what is the Chamber doing to help on that front?
Listen, it's tough for so many reasons. And I think we also have to note, besides the empathy point, or quite related to the empathy point, is we're just in a highly emotional state as people. And that makes it harder. So I've learned very quickly that some of our more rational arguments, if we have a minute to make them well reasoned, and some of the things we're advocating for, we're going to lose to an emotional argument, especially in this environment. And so you have to just be extremely disciplined about how you communicate, and know that most people are on overload and can only take in this is the rule book for all communicators. Keep it simple. But in this moment, it feels even more important. And I think by keeping things simple, by being transparent when you don't have all the answers, by sharing the information that you do have, and that's what we try to do, sharing information and best practices across our different member groups, that's the best way to confront the fear. But we're not going to get past that highly charged emotional state anytime soon. On a bright note, our own research and research we have access to shows us that people, of course, do want to get back to their lives and return to normal. And they're going to need, some are ready today to get back to some of the activities that they love. And most people will need some assurances that take different forms about what kind of information they need to feel safe in either a business environment or leisure activity environment. And so all we can do is continue to learn from that, but then on the advocacy side, recognize that we're not going to have a one-size-fits-all formula for every single type of business, and businesses need flexibility in how they implement and consult with public health guidelines. And so that's what we're focusing our attention on now as we continue to help mitigate the impact of the virus, both from a public health perspective and an economic perspective. But really, what does that path forward look like, which is the program we launched a few weeks ago, and what new information can we be putting out there as soon as possible to help combat some of that fear, because fear is based on the unknown.
Thank you. Rosanna, what have you learned? What have the hotels and the lodging industry, how are you pivoting and learning in this process too?
Sure. It's an hourly education. I'm not going to lie. I think there's so much that we've all learned throughout this crisis. I think more than anything, what warms the heart is really just how resilient this industry is. And I would say that's the case for all of hospitality and leisure. I mean, when you're in the guest service industry, right, your natural inclination is to help somebody, to help the person next to you and do what you can for the community. And And so I think we've really learned how to harness that from a communication standpoint, right? So right out of the gate, within 2 weeks of the sort of peak of the crisis, hotels were coming to us with ideas of how they could help first responders and wanting to be declared as essential businesses so that they could provide and stay open to help all those who needed a place to stay, whether it was government officials or FEMA or doctors and nurses and truckers who are on the road delivering groceries. So we were able to quickly launch a campaign called Hospitality for Hope, and within days we grew a database of 1,000 hotels to 17,000 hotels in the country who opened their doors and were able to help and make that connectivity. And we're now growing that across the country, but being able to share that information in a time of crisis with the broader membership, those stories of what really is heroic at the community level. People want to see that. They get inspired by that. It helps them get through some of the most challenging times and know that there is something that they can do with their doors closed even. We've had stories of hotel owners who have turned open their kitchens and they've brought their kitchen staff in to use up the food and make meals for communities in need. And so there's just countless stories of that. And I think that has been maybe not so much a learning as a reminder of what the industry is capable of and what our members are capable of. And from a communicating standpoint, making sure that you're using that in the right way, right? Because we still have to remember, I think tone in communication over the course of these last 3 months has been what we've really spent some time focusing on. And I think I've spent more time in the last 3 months than in my 6 years at the association changing tone of notes and messages to make sure that we're not tone deaf, to make sure that we're we're leading with empathy, that we're showing that we understand how challenging things are, particularly when we're asking them to do something, whether it's send a note to a member of Congress or a letter or a text or to participate in something like Hospitality for Hope, making sure that we understand that they are going through a really difficult time. It's hardship, it's personal, and it's painful. So I think those are some of the things that have stuck with me over this time.
I just love these stories of resiliency of your industry and also the airlines and the small businesses. Everybody's looking for those stories and want to read them. So, thank you for sharing all of these. And I kind of want to take it more on a personal level at the moment and ask on a lighter note, what's the one thing you're doing now, you as a leader, during this pandemic that you want to continue doing even when the world returns to normal? And I'll start and I'll answer that as I'm obsessed with my Peloton bike nowadays, and I'm loving that. I want to keep going on that as well. So let me turn to Michelle. What are you doing?
It's a fun question. I'm also obsessed with Peloton. But I'll say two things. One is that previous to this role, I worked in London for 4 years and managed a global team, basically through visual platforms such as this one we're all on today. And so it took me maybe 2 minutes too long to realize that I had a comfort level with switching very fast to this environment that my team didn't necessarily have, or a lot of my colleagues who are used to those in-person collaboration meetings. But I was really proud, back to the resilience point, of how quickly everyone pivoted and was able to just amp up their work from, as Rosanna said, from 120% to 200% in service to our members. So I do hope that people can find that balance that we were talking about earlier with the mental health and burnout, of making sure that just because you have your work computer at home doesn't mean you have to work 24/7, and you can step away from that, because we know that it's not sustainable and in the best interest. On a personal note, back to the London point, there's friends in London that I haven't spoken to in a year, and now we're doing those virtual happy hours that are getting a little tired because we all just need to take a break from the screen. But I hope when I'm not staring at a screen all day during the day, that I can keep up with spending time with people that I really miss. And only because we've all kind of calmed down our hectic lives, I'll continue to touch base with people who I care about a lot and can't necessarily get on a plane tomorrow to go and see. But I hope that people are finding those moments of quiet time to reflect and appreciate, knowing that if you have the luxury to do so, that's a place of privilege, and a lot of people are really hurting, and what can you do at the individual level to give back to them? On a macro level, I can't help but say that the level of collaboration that we've seen between businesses and government coming together to solve this this crisis together is unprecedented, and I hope, and some of the bipartisanship as well. I really have fingers and toes crossed that that spirit of we're all in this together holds after the pandemic for some period of time, because I definitely think this country needed a reset on that. And so that's one of the things that I hope sustain, both from a personal and professional perspective.
Great, and thank you. And what about Rebecca? What about you? What are you doing that's new and different and that you want to keep up during?
I'm actually cooking dinner at night, which that's been very new and different for me. But it's been fun. It's been enjoyable. It's been valuable to actually have the old school traditional family dinner here in my household. So I can't sit here and guarantee that that's going to happen every single day going forward once we do resume to different activities and schedules, but it has certainly been good timing. And I have discovered a few pots and pans that I didn't know I had to. So that's been great on the personal front. But something that, and I realize you asked what will we keep, but I also think that there's something that I look forward to going back to. And I mentioned earlier how much I value face-to-face interaction. And I think that while everybody has found ways to work through and work around the stay-at-home orders and different travel restrictions and so forth, and we all are trying to still get our job done and communicate as effectively as we can, there just is nothing that can replace personal face-to-face interaction. Whether it's, we talk so much today about empathy. I think that empathy is always more profound when you're right there with the person and you can share a story or share an experience. I think that, collaboration is stronger when you're together. So I very much look forward to being back with my colleagues, but also having, whether it's coffee or lunch, and yes, I used to work in the beer industry, so I have to say, or meeting for that 5 o'clock beer to brainstorm, share ideas, and to also get this economy moving again. I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to the beer and the wine and the dinner as well. Thank you. And last but not least, Rosanna, do you have anything fun to share with us on what you've been doing and what you want to keep?
Well, hard to top what those two ladies said, because mine are very similar. There's a lot of food and drinking in my house, but also connecting with family. I have a lot of my family is either in Canada or Italy, and so we've adopted weekly weekend happy hours, the famous Zoom happy hour, and so and that's just been nice. And quite frankly, to have our whole family get on that and do that at one time is even different than the in-person family reunions we've had. And so that's been really enjoyable. And I think, that's something I'd like to keep up, because the distance does keep us away, and so to make that more frequent. But like Rebecca, I miss the personal connection. I love my team. I'm such a hugger. I know that's going to be a problem when we go back and when we get to see everyone, because I really want to hug everyone. But to be able to see your family, your friends, and your colleagues face to face. I think if this crisis has taught us anything, it's the idea that we all want that social connectivity. It matters. It's important. Business travel matters. Those in-person meetings matter. Yes, technology is great, and we get to do this, and it's wonderful, but it cannot replace what those the live event is. And I think that we've all gained a much greater appreciation for that. So I'm hopeful for that, and I think it will, selfishly also help our respective businesses and small business owners as we're talking about hospitality and leisure, because they all need to fly somewhere and need to stay in a hotel. So we're hoping that will happen sooner rather than later.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And you all have been such great advocates for your industry and for your all the small businesses and the big businesses out there. I hope that we can all travel and stay in a hotel soon. As we wrap up, just thank you again for making time for this. The quarantine has us all physically separated. But we are still finding lots of ways and important ways to connect and support each other with this Women Taking the Lead community, and then within our own families and our own industries.
We've got a couple of good questions here. One is asking about how the pandemic changes the way organizations communicate with employees and public in the future. Another one's about lessons learned. I feel like some of us covered that in our answer.
Oh, I did.
Okay, great. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, no, thank you for doing that. What about lessons from international partners? Any lessons here on the international side that we can implement? Anything that's different or unique?
I'll start by saying that's been an important source of information for us at the Chamber, given many of our members have global operations, as well as the ladies on the panel. And everybody's in a different kind of life stage of the virus going through. And so, again, imperfect information. But we launched pretty early on a global tracker on our webpage so that people could know what are the different countries doing in the face of the pandemic. We also track that by state as well as people begin to reopen. So the lessons are, more information is helpful. Too much information is not helpful. And so at the Chamber, we just try to be a curator of the best information that we think will be the most useful and have the most impact to as many people as possible.
Rebecca, do you have anything you want to add, or Rosanna?
No, I think Michelle hit the nail on the head, though, when she mentioned basically tracking how this pandemic was evolving, since it did hit other countries first. And our carriers clearly were impacted from the earliest days of this, when we were getting phone calls about a virus and before it was declared a pandemic. So it has clearly been a global conversation, and we are continuing to monitor decisions made and impacts both for our passenger and our cargo airlines as they service countries. First it's China, then we saw Italy, of course, and other countries clearly. But it's just continuing to evolve, and just like we saw it evolve globally, now we're seeing new cities and new states that are popping up domestically as well. So we're clearly far from over having these conversations, and we're just going to have to keep a close watch on different communities here in the United States as well as globally.
Great, thank you. I'll turn it over to Rosanna for any views on international. You guys are domestic.
We're actually really focused on domestic at the moment, and so I think the wonderful women covered it. We are always looking to see what we can impart and take, and is there anything that's being really effective. I think it's just such a different dynamic for us because we're really laser focused on operations in the U.S.
And thank you. We have seen a couple questions here pop up about and I think Michelle answered this one, a task force or teams assembled to navigate the pandemic. Rebecca, have you guys assembled a team internally that you can recommend, or?
Yeah, we have a cross-functional team internally that we have identified, and just like anybody's, and you'll see that I shot a reminder that we're all working from home these days. But it is a cross-functional, cross-disciplinary team, and we are looking at, I mean, it's our operations folks, it's our legal, it's the administrative and financial people, it's obviously comms, because here I am talking about it, policy, government affairs. It's a wide-reaching group of people that we have assembled to look at this crisis, to look at this emergency. And again, it's like I said earlier, there's been no playbook. There are lots of questions, and we're all just trying to figure out maybe not necessarily the right answer, but the best answer that helps our companies, our members, but also that helps, in our case, the flying public, that helps preserve those 750,000 jobs out there. And it helps our partners too. We talked a lot about the collaborative spirit with the hotels and other businesses, how we all need to get business back. So we are trying to look at this from a 360 standpoint, but the good news is, I have to tell you, and this is, I want to certainly applaud my colleagues within A4A, that working collaboratively during this emergency hasn't been something new for us, that we have such a strong leadership team. We have such great communication and collaboration on any given day of the week that we were actually well prepared. Nobody could have guessed this crisis or the magnitude of it, but we were certainly prepared for it.
I'll agree with that as well. Ashley, I was really, impressed, and we all know how important it is to work for an organization with a mission, and the Chamber's mission, as the mission of our other guests, has come to life in just such a powerful way. I see a question about the work-life balance and how you step away when your computer and your work is your home. And I will say I learned that lesson the hard way from my old job of having a team that at some point somebody was always on and working around the globe, and I experienced severe burnout in the first few months until I got a handle on that. So my number one piece of advice on that is that people have to set their own boundaries of what that is, and everybody's are different. And so I'm constantly reminding my team at the Chamber, who for the first month, we didn't take a day off, Saturdays and Sundays included, until we forced, like, everybody, you have to take Saturday off, just so we can keep going with the important work that we're doing. And so I just constantly, as a leader, am reminding and empowering people to own that for themselves. And you really have to say it like 10 times before they kind of get it. And you also have to lead by example. So as we go into summer, I said, listen, it's going to be staycations probably for the most part, but we still deserve summer breaks. And so I'll go first, and let me tell you the couple days that I'm going to take off as best as I can. Of course, you can reach me if anything breaks, but I really just wanted to create that permission on the team to step away when they need to and set their own boundaries, because everybody's are different, and we're all dealing with different dynamics on the home front that we have to balance with our work responsibilities. And I think that's an important question, so I wanted to address it.
Thank you. Rosanna, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that is an incredibly terrific point about leading by example. I know I try to make sure that my team has sets their boundaries, or understand that they're all going to juggle and do their work when it's suitable for them, whether they're dealing with little kids during the day and they can do it at nap time, and at some points that means that my inbox is flooded 24 hours a day. And so I think the lesson for me is, I don't think I'm doing as good a job of Michelle, but setting my own boundaries and realizing that, okay, just because they're sending me their material, content, information, response backs at 11 or 12 p.m., I need to pull the brakes. So I think that is a great reminder to all of us. It really is about boundaries. It's so hard to pull away and give yourself that space that you need, but without it, you do burn out. I mean, I think I certainly sense it on our short team, short staffed team. And so making sure that they can take a day off here or there during the week even, and just, not worry about what's left and who's doing it. Because, in a crisis, it eventually, even a crisis becomes day to day, right? And so everything will get out, and eventually someone's filling in and making sure that we're still doing our job and sharing information, but taking that time is so important.
I can't help the opportunity to say that Rebecca would advise us all to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first.
Right.
And that's what that's about. Quite frankly, 6 weeks in, I went down hard for 24 hours. I was exhausted. I thought I could keep it up, that pace, and I went down hard. And I was afraid I was sick with the virus, but luckily I was not, knock wood. And so that really was a reminder of the oxygen first for yourself, to take care of everybody else that needs you.
You guys are wonderful. This has been an incredible panel. What an amazing group of women, and what a powerful discussion. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you to all of you, especially Rosanna. And the power of our community is great. Let's keep together. Let's help each other, and let's break down all those barriers as far as bipartisanship, and as far as how we talk and communicate together. So thank you again for this panel. And if you have any questions, please, to the listeners, please feel free to reach out, and I'll make sure to connect you to any of the women on this panel. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ashley.